On the 2nd of April, President Donald Trump signed an executive order imposing tariffs on all U.S. imports, and Nigeria got hit with a 14% tariff.
In other words, they charge us, we charge them.
While oil and mineral exports, which account for over 90% of Nigeria's export to the US, are exempt from the tariffs, textile and agricultural exports, which account for about 2% of Nigeria's exports, would be most affected. However, on the 9th of April, shortly after the tariffs were rolled out, President Donald Trump announced a 90-day pause on all the reciprocal tariffs for all countries except for China.
I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, because I told them if you retaliate, we're going to double it. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate.
So what does this really mean for Nigeria's 323.96 billion naira non-oil exports to the US? What exactly are reciprocal tariffs, and why did the US impose them in the first place?
Retaliatory tariff is more like you repaying your counterparty in the same coin that you are being paid. So it simply means that if I'm paying huge tax on bringing things to your economy, of course you should do the same when you actually bring things to my country, and that's exactly what has been happening.
Since 2000, most of Nigeria's exports have enjoyed duty-free access to the US through its African Growth and Opportunity Act. Meanwhile, Nigeria charges an average of 27% on US goods. With Trump's America First trade policy in full swing, the US began targeting countries with trade surpluses, and Nigeria made that list.
The United States government has been operating more like a deficit trade balance. And what this simply means is that the imported goods into America has always been more than the exported goods. So what the current government is trying to do is to actually find a way where maybe your import and export are actually equal.
According to them, Nigeria has been engaging in unfair trade practices that have harmed U.S. exporters, citing things like our import bans on beef, pork, and certain pharmaceuticals.
The other products we export are largely food items. And then we have some exports related to our textile items. So the tariff, the 14% tariff, will be largely on those food items and those fully made textile items.
Although agriculture accounts for just 2% of Nigeria's US exports, and the country's biggest trade partners remain France, Spain, and the Netherlands, Nigeria's non-oil and non-energy exports like fertilizer, cocoa beans, lead, flour, soya beans, and rubber are at risk. Together, they are worth 323.96 billion naira, and the new tariffs could reduce their competitiveness in the U.S. market.
It simply means that our product may be overpriced when you actually, and at the end of the day, we may not be getting that huge patronage as we've been enjoying in the past. And also, another thing also is the fact that maybe the importer or the exporter will now have to start taking a bit of part of the pain, whether to actually absorb some of those costs.
Nigeria's 5.08 trillion naira oil and mineral US exports are exempt from the new tariffs, but Nigeria still isn't in the clear.
If we continue in this right, if the president of America is not backing down and is not rolling back these threats, and at the same time the leaders in other global economy like China, they are now also relenting in actually retaliating on some of these things, what this will crystallize to a global economic crisis.
A trade war will have overall impact on global economy. There are areas it will affect the Nigerian economy, not necessarily based on the tariff, but based on the impact on crude oil prices.
The broader trade war triggered by these tariffs has created global economic uncertainty, which is driving down oil prices. Since the announcement, crude oil has dipped to a 4-year low, sitting at around $60 per barrel, a sharp contrast to the $75 per barrel benchmark in Nigeria's proposed 2025 budget. If there is a sharp sell-off in oil, that could be devastating for the naira.
Based on the impact on crude oil prices, and anything that affects crude oil prices affects our reserve, affect our foreign exchange, and affect our reserve. Whatever affects our reserve will affect our exchange rate, and the transmission effect of exchange rate movement will be on inflation rate. and inflation will affect standard of living of Nigerians.
Exports are one of the few steady sources of forex into the country. If US buyers reduce purchases due to the higher prices caused by tariffs, FX inflows could decline, worsening the naira's performance.
The government is also looking at a way to actually sell abroad, to actually generate more FX revenue. Because when you don't generate FX, you may not be able to meet FX obligations. And when you don't have enough FX to meet FX obligations on your table, it simply means that there's pressure on your currency.
According to Marcel Okeke, negotiation is the only viable option for smaller, weaker countries like Nigeria in such situations. Beyond negotiation, adding value locally and making Nigeria attractive for global production could be a boost to the economy.
Nigeria needs to move away from being more like a consuming economy. We need to move more like a productive economy. Nigeria is a country that is so blessed with a lot of natural resources. And aside natural resources, Nigeria is blessed with a lot of human resources. And don't also forget that Africa has the youngest population in the world. Our average population is just about 21 years. So it simply means that we have huge human capacity. We have huge natural capacity. So what we need to move beyond is that we need to move beyond actually exporting natural resources. We need to add value to some of these things.
Assuming we have a cost-efficient manufacturing base, with a 14% tariff, we would have seen manufacturers move to Nigeria, because at that rate, you can easily export to the US. And your export will be far more competitive than what other countries are exporting to US.
Also, this could be the perfect moment to strengthen intra-African trade.
In the emerging markets, and particularly for Nigeria and the African countries, there has to be a realignment of trade and trade relations. And what that means is that with the enactment and establishment of the Africa Free Trade Agreement, plus now there would be more bilateral relations with some of the more developed economies that are looking at investing in Africa. There may be an opportunity for us to attract investments for people or countries that want to avoid those high tariffs from the US.
According to Wale Edu, Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Nigeria is relatively insulated from the worst impacts thanks to the exemption of oil and minerals, and so far, Nigeria has not responded or retaliated. But as the global trade environment continues to shift, Nigeria must act fast and smart. The longer the delay, the higher the risk of deeper economic strain. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to share your thoughts on how you think Nigeria should respond to these new tariffs.